Dennis M. Clark.
Here.
Becky Curtis.
Here.
Julie Osmus.
Here.
Roy Estes.
Here.
John Ingram.
Here. Next item on the agenda is public participation. If there's anybody wishing to address the council, please come to the podium, sign in your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes to address the council. Okay. All right. Seeing none, that moves us to the consent agenda. Are there any requests to move items from the consent agenda to the regular agenda?
I need to recuse myself for item B.
Okay. All right, so for that particular item, Councilwoman Osmond will be recused, and the clerk will note that, please. Okay, the clerk will now read the items on the consent agenda.
Item A, motion to approve the minutes from the April 12, 2021 special council session. Item B, motion to appoint Veronica Dial to the Cameron Housing Authority to replace the unexpired term of Shirley Combs. Item C, motion to reappoint Randy Gould to the Tax Income and Finance Commission. Item D, motion to approve a caterer's permit for the SIP, Leah McLean, for an event sponsored by Cameron Main Street Inc., Vegas Night on Cameron Main Street, to be held in McCorkle Park on Saturday, May 1st from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Item E, motion to approve Resolution 2021-11, a resolution for the City of Cameron, Missouri, accepting the city clerk's certification of records destroyed. Item F, motion to approve Resolution 2021-14, a resolution to designate an official representative and alternative representative to the Board of Directors of the Great Northwest Wholesale Water Commission. Item G, motion to approve the abatement of uncollectible delinquent personal property taxes for 2017 and older. And item H, motion to certify the delinquent real estate and personal property taxes for the City of Cameron, Missouri.
Thank you. Chair, I entertain a motion to pass the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of passing the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Is that 4 in favor, 1 abstaining?
Oh, yeah, on. Thank you for catching that. Okay, next item on the agenda will be the manager's report. Manager Rasmussen.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, and it's a pleasure to be back in the City Council chambers. I just want to let everybody know that the pictures that you see on the screen above you are also presented in front of each one of the council members, so they're seeing exactly the same thing that you're seeing. And we have the new speaker system, so I'd ask everybody when you're speaking into the microphone to be close to the microphone. We have a little bit of an unusually long city manager's report because I have several reports that the council has been asking us to get back to, and so we're including them here. And I'll get to those in a second under staff reports. But the first thing I want to talk about was the COVID, and attached to the city manager's report, you'll see the COVID stats, and those are showing us being again significantly down. We're only about 1 new case per day in our 4-county area, and that is one of the reasons that we've been able to come back down into the council chambers. I also wanted to then give a report on the Great Northwest Wholesale Water Commission, abbreviated GENWIC, for those of you who heard that comment. And that is, there are 3 main issues remaining, and we're closing fast on them. One is the approval of the plan by USDA, who's going to give us our loan. I think we have that done, and I haven't gotten a report today, but our engineer said he finished that up on Friday. The second is the completion of easement acquisitions. I think at last count we had 7 yet to go, but the appraiser is working on those, and I think they'll have those at the end of this week. And the final is the take-or-pay contracts with the 3 member cities. We have to make sure that we've updated those so that the amount of money that will be gained by the Wholesale Water Commission will pay for the loans, and USDA will be looking for that. And at that time, I think we can send this out for bid. I'm talking to USDA, and I hope we can come back to the commission and say we're ready to go out to bid, and I hope we can do that this month. I've attached the February financials to this, and I think there's nothing in that is unexpected. One of the things, though, is we expect to bring a new contract back to the council for the band, because the band now has been accumulating some money in their account because, unfortunately, because of COVID, we were not able to have a real season last year. So they're accumulating some money, and we'll come back with a new contract for the council on that. I also included a copy of the commercial development timeline. We have been working this pretty hard as a staff, and the reason for that is that way we can get developers in front of this timeline, and then if we get, instead of getting near the end and having to either play catch-up ball or do things in a dramatic fashion at the very end, we can get everything done early on. And this is still new to some developers, but staff is continuing to press forward. We're going to see some positive results on that. I also then wanted to go into staff reports, which you see there. And we have 3 of them. One on general fund trends and street cuts and dilapidated buildings. And the council has asked for a report of these things. So I'm going to start out with the first one here, and I'm going to ask Carmen, our finance director, to come up and walk through a couple of these charts that she's provided, which shows what those general fund and tax trends look like. And then I'd like to make a couple of comments on it. Carmen?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The first slide we have, or the first graph, is cash balance. As you can see, our cash has been volatile in the past, but here at the last 10 years, we've had a basically healthy cash balance for the operations of the city. We just need to be very prudent on the timing and of the projects we have ongoing and when we expect cash replacement. On the revenue and expense graph, I would just like to highlight in 2008, the expenses was rather high. During that time frame, we did 2 larger street improvement projects within like a rolling 18 months. And all of the reimbursements do not always match the expense time frame. And then in 2020, we built the animal control facility, which was approximately $600,000, all in that time frame. So the revenues are relatively flat, but we do what best we can. The second page of graphs is our 1% sales tax. So council had asked for a 20-year time frame on revenues, and that was the basis for all these graphs, was this 20-year time frame. So in 2001, we started out at just over $1 million in sales tax, and we have grown 20 years later to $1,400,000. We haven't really reduced or fallen in sales tax, but that is just a very small increase per year in sales tax. Then in property tax bill, similar situation. That is a stacked graph. So the purple is the real estate, the orange is the personal property, and like I said, it just slowly increases because we cannot do a large increase in property tax from one year to the next. The state has a way of equalizing the levy versus the property value. And this information is just for the general fund only. So this is only the general fund property tax. We know that there is general, park, band, and library. So their amounts are separate from these. And they are not the same amount as these. General fund is the largest. The third graph, then was also requested on what have we spent on improvement contracts, maintenance materials, and projects. So the improvement contracts is the larger overlay milling projects that we do. Maintenance materials is the coal patch, gravel, I can't think of the other, salt, your road treatments. And then the third category is the projects. And I know the print's rather hard to see, but we're going out 20 years. So the blue is when we had money to do this, to do the street improvement contracts, we did the street improvement contracts. And if you would refer that back to the cash fund balance report, they trail each other. The pink, that was when we did the Griffin Road expansion and the McElwain Drive, 36 highway projects, and they really follow this, a short time frame. And then currently, we also have the Orange Street CDBG grant project. That's not really listed on this project because we ended it as of fiscal year 2020. Is there any questions? I sped through that pretty quick.
I would like a copy of all of these. We just got some, but I'd like to pull out of them.
Okay.
I'm gonna let you
Okay, I'll send out an email for everyone, will that be all right?
Thank you very much. On the 1% sales tax revenue, could you say how much that was a year in percentage?
Yeah, I'll go through that.
I think
Okay,
Steve has
okay,
some of those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen.
Okay, thank you very much, Carmen. I wanted to come up here and talk a little bit more about those numbers. You see those in the graphs, and sometimes it's tough to analyze those and see what they really mean. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about the history of tax revenue and city expenses. I've heard people say that the tax revenues are flat. Well, if you look at these charts to the casual observer, it doesn't look like they're flat. It looks like they are going up a little in terms of sales tax. But really what happens is the actual numbers is that the sales tax revenue increased from $1,050,000 to $1,442,000 in 20 years. Now, it sounds good, but what does that mean? Well, that equates to 1.8% per year, or an increase of $19,600 per year. Now, to put that into perspective and to use an example, because we've been talking a lot about street maintenance and street improvements, I'll use the example of the cost of a ton of asphalt, which increased from $45 in 2004 to $75,000 in 2021. Now, that actually is 16 years. It's not the same 20 years that we use in tax revenue above. But I could only get an accurate figure for 2004, so I used 16 years instead of 20 years. But doing that same math, it was a 60% increase in the cost of asphalt, or 3%. Now, that doesn't seem like very much, those small percentage, but what we're end up talking about is thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to the year to the city. So what you take away from these numbers is the general conclusion that the cost of goods and services is exceeding the tax revenue increase. And I want to say that's a cause for some concern, and we need to do something about it. It's nothing unusual that we're dealing with that other cities aren't. Other cities are dealing with exactly the same thing, or confronted with the same challenges. So let me talk a little bit, since I used the example of a street improvement. We have a line item in the city's budget which is street improvement. And so here's an example of how that street improvement works. I've always said that it takes about $500,000 per year in our budget to keep up with our needed street improvement. And how do we get that number? Well, we've got 120 lane miles, and it costs $4,200 per lane mile per year, given that the streets will last 20 years or so. If you keep them up and they're all in great shape, well, you don't have to spend quite that much money. But if they're going deteriorating, then you have to spend more money. So what is it, kind of the rule of thumb? Well, it's about that number. And that's for our cities as well as other cities. So what you have to do is you have to put about $500,000 in the street improvement line item just to keep even with our current improvement. You'd like to get a little bit better, 500,000, less than 500,000, you can't keep up with it. So what's the history of what we've done then? Let's take a look at this next slide. Do you have that in there? There you go. Okay, so if you look at this slide, what you can see is in 2021, we didn't put anything in the street improvement line item. And in 2020, we didn't put any in it. So that's 0% of the general fund. In 2019, we put 269,000. 2018, 232,000, 217, only 14,000, which was essentially 0%. In 2016, we were at 583,000. That's kind of about what you need to do. But generally, you can see that line is going down in terms of the amount of money that we're able to put into street improvement. The general fund is 25% sales tax. Other funds in there, we have some from property tax, and we have some from services that we get, fees that we get. Some are the ones that we get from telecommunications companies. So a lot of it goes in there. But just for an example, so that we can isolate something and talk about it, I've talked about the sales tax, which is 25% of the general fund. And this street improvement line item is only one of 350 line items. So this is competing for that money in the general fund. And how much is in the general fund? Well, about $5.5 million. And that includes salaries for police officers. It includes health care. And, you know, you talk about things going up in cost. We talked about asphalt going up 3%. Well, health care goes up a lot more than that. And so all of these costs are going up, and they're all competing for that amount of money that is in the general fund. Well, so what's the implication of that then? If we've got the cost of goods and services going up, and our tax isn't keeping up with that, well, it's like in your family. If your expenses are going up and your income are going down, you're slowly going broke. That's what that means. So let me give you an example then of what you can do here. And again, this is nothing different than what other cities are dealt with. So here's 3 solutions to the problem. Well, one, you can increase sales tax. And we have in the general fund the ability to increase that by a quarter cent. A quarter cent sales tax would give you $340,000 a year. The problem is that's only a temporary fix, because you get that quarter cent, so you get the $340,000. But as we saw on the other slide, the cost of goods and services continues to rise. The quarter cent doesn't continue to rise. You still keep getting the $340,000, and the cost of goods and services and people and material and healthcare keeps going up. So raising the sales tax by that extra quarter cent might help you in a year or two. It's not the long-term fix. Well, you can decrease other services. Let me give you an example. Tim and Paul aren't going to like that, but I'll use it as an example. We could eliminate all of code enforcement. Take that budget out of there. We'd eliminate the animal care facility. We wouldn't police up stray dogs. We wouldn't do code enforcement. Maybe some people might like that, but we wouldn't have a building inspection and plan review. And that would save us $346,000 a year. That's about the same. Well, of course, that doesn't work, because that's only a temporary solution. That only works until you run out of other services to provide. You just can't keep cutting service out of service. So what are communities stuck with? Well, they're stuck with the third item, and that is increase the tax base. And by that, it means that is a way that the actual dollar amount that's gained from the tax percentage increases. And by that I mean that you don't increase the taxes, you just have more people paying those. Those are people that come to town. It's more development in the city. It's more people staying and coming and visiting and leaving their tax dollars in the city. And that's why every city council has as its first priority economic development. Why is that? Well, because of this problem. And I tell you, why does every city have that? And I must have interviewed in 100 different cities for jobs. And maybe that means I can't keep a job. But what every one of them says, you know, they talk about public safety, you know, they talk about infrastructure, but the number one thing in every job application is economic development. That's what cities need first and foremost, because that's what they do to solve this problem. And I leave you with that because what you do is you can't tax yourself to prosperity, and you can't cut to prosperity. And if you keep going the same way that we're going now, what ends up doing is you just go bankrupt. So you have to do something, and that's why economic development is so important. I wanted to show you those things because that's kind of the implication of the good question that the council asked is, what are we doing with the tax revenues of the general fund? Well, there's a gap there, and we need to do something to start working on it. And that's why Tim and Paul and other people working in economic development are so much working for the city to get our tax base increased. I just wanted to let you know what those numbers meant. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I'll make sure you all get copies of these slides too. Thank you very much.
Could somebody on the staff maybe give us an example of what would happen if we got, say, a 10% jump in commerce? That would mean people spending the night or shopping here, coming here for recreation, leaving money, moving here, that kind of thing.
Sure. 10% is a big jump, and you can see what we've happened at 1.8%. Our accountant over here, Jim, can you figure that out for us?
Sure.
What, come up to the microphone.
Well, if you refer back to, the graph that Carmen prepared with the 1% sales tax revenue, and that was like 1,445,000 a year. So a 10% increase would, of course, be 145,000, and that would be general fund, additional general fund revenue. But in addition to that, we have other funds that, besides the general fund, that are also have sales tax revenue, and that includes the park fund. That would help the park fund. It would help our sewer department with our additional tax on sales tax for sewer. It would help the stormwater, transportation, our safety improvement, and our fire improvement fund. So if you add up all those together, in addition to the 1,444,000, it's somewhere between 295,000 and 300,000 additional for these other funds. So it'd be a big boost for those funds.
You might know this. What does inflation go up a year basically? Isn't that like 2%?
It's been pretty low lately.
Yeah.
I think it's 2.8. I believe over the last 14 years, it's been about 2.8% overall CPI, but our costs don't really reflect accurate. Our costs don't go along with the CPI because our costs are largely, well, like you said, the asphalt. You've got healthcare costs. So to say our costs go up 2.8 is probably low if to compare that to CPI.
But the revenue going up 1.8, I mean, that has to do, I mean, you could just take inflation out of that, it would actually be decreasing, right?
Exactly. Even if you use the 2.8, you're losing 1%. But I'm sure that it's more of a loss than that. So.
Well, and I've read several comments. One of the reasons that we have not had 500,000 a year in that line item is because there's not 500,000 there. Would you agree with that? You were on the finance committee, and I'm assuming you wouldn't put it in there if it was there. So we do have a revenue problem, not a spending problem. And people, I think many people don't know that our sewer rates are artificially low, because there's a 3/8 of a cent tax, that when somebody comes in from out of town and spends money here, it keeps our sewer rates lower. I think a bump to the park board might be, if it went up 10%, I think it would be like 75,000 for the park board.
I had about 80 for the park board.
80, okay.
80 for the park board, sewer about 45,000. I've got stormwater would help 34,000, transportation 69,000. Safety improvement 33, fire improvement about 33, so it'd be a nice boost for all those different funds, so.
So the position that I would come from is Cameron is unique and very fortunate, and that many communities, they only have one thing they can pull from. Maybe they're trying to get people to move there, they're trying to get a new business to move there. Because of our geographic location, because of the interstate US 36, we can try multiple strategies and get little increases that together combined turn into a bigger number, hopefully getting up to that 10% and eventually hopefully growing more. So anytime somebody shops here, comes in from out of town, comes here for recreation, our aquatic center, decides to spend the night here, decides to move here, collectively, when you put them together, that is the way forward. My understanding is if we do nothing, we just slowly financially strangle. And so, how do we attract more commerce here? And my take on it is that purchasing decisions are not just based on price. They're based on the value that you bring to it. So, some of my harshest critics live in nice houses. They're not living in the cheapest house they could possibly live in. They're not driving the cheapest car they could possibly drive. Did price factor into it? Absolutely. But value also factors into it. And so every time we as a community find a way to bring more value, whether it's something small or large, collectively, when you put it together with some time, that's our best shot. And that's why I have been so passionate about special projects and some of the other stuff, trying to find ways to bring more value so that we can get other people to pay for our stuff. So, does anybody else have any comments, questions?
When you say 500,000, just as a ballpark number, do you know what percentage that is of an increase?
Well, I'm going from memory on what was shown, but it was the last 2 years it was 0, then it was like ballpark 250 and 250, and I think 1 year we had 585, but that was kind of an outlier.
What did we do differently that year? And what did, what 582,000 and then?
I don't remember since then.
All right.
Well, when the,
But it was an unusual year, I do remember that.
when the finance committee meets, we will start looking at the new budget. We'll just look and see what you can get into that line item. I think each year we kind of can get it down to about 200,000 or 250,000. That's not enough. That's why another 10% increase in sales tax would certainly get us near that 500,000. Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. I had two other things that I wanted to answer for the City Council. One, I had been asked of where we are on the street cuts, because we have two kinds of street cuts. One is the one that we do ourselves in water and sewer and repair them. The others are things that other entities do. And so I've asked Drew if he could give us a quick rundown on that. Drew?
Yeah, as far as the street cuts, the two different categories. There's actually a subsection of the second category.
Speaking to the microphone.
There's actually a second subsection of the others. There is utility companies such as fiber, phone, cable TV, stuff like that. Those are other utilities that use our right of way. So those are cut. Then there's also other individuals that cut, maybe for their own water line or their own sewer line that would cut a street. And then, of course, as Steve mentioned, the city, our own water and sewer department. So there's those three different categories. We've got pretty much everything worked out with all of the utility users, but one, and I think we are still working on that last utility company, and as a user of our right-of-way, hopefully making some progress on that one. As far as our own city departments, water department hired a contractor and has been going around catching up on the last couple of years of utility cuts. So I'm sure you've seen that we probably, I think this map, I think they probably got about 8 of these done. Some of them still require additional work, like some curb and gutter and sidewalks and stuff like that to complete. So, and then of course, then the other one is the individual contractors for hire going out and working for a personal property owner to do their water or sewer. As Steve's mentioned, there is permits and it's been required, just not something that the city has always followed up on. So it's something we're going to start reevaluating, seeing how we can update that code, make it more user-friendly, and start enforcing it to keep our streets through utility cuts in better shape.
The code says that when anyone wants to cut a street, they have to get a permit from the city clerk, and they also have to post a deposit or a bond for repairing that. I think maybe that ordinance has been more honored in the breach than the observance, and we intend to tighten up on that so that we can get all of these street cuts repaired and not let them languish over time. Okay, thank you very much, Drew. And the last item I had was council asked a question about what the status of dilapidated buildings are, kind of the numbers about where they are. And I asked Tim if he could put together a summary of that for us.
Thank you, City Council. I just got a one chart slide, just talk about the Dilapidated to New project program that the City of Cameron offers. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that program, but the Dilapidated to New program is a 50-50 or 100% demo for citizens or builders or developers to participate with the city as far as removing derelict structures. The 50% is a shared cost for the city and the property owner to remove a property that's been a nuisance violation for years and years and eyesore to the community. The 100% demo is where a developer or a property owner cannot afford to remove the property. The city will take the responsibility of demoing that structure and basically taking the lot once it's been completed and selling it or putting it out for bid, so for someone to build a new single-family structure. As you all may know, there's a housing shortage in America today. So, you know, the goal of the city is to promote home ownership. We have a lot of properties, a lot of families that start new that can't afford the $250,000 homes or the $125,000 homes. So this allows them the opportunity to get a home where they can start fresh, not rent, and have something they can call their own. So since my time here and Paul's times here, from 2017, we demoed 12 structures. 2018, we did 5, and 3 in 2019, and 6 in 2020. 2021 hasn't been completed yet. That is our target list for properties to be demoed. You know, Steve brought it up earlier about economic development, but if you really think about it, economic development is quality of life, where you live at, how your house looks, how the business that you go to look. You know, extends beyond residential structure, it extends to commercial structures. If you don't maintain your property, it's just like a car, it's gonna break down on you. You either fix it up front to make it save cost up front, or you let it wait and wait, prolong it, and then you get stuck with something that you can't afford. A lot of people, like I said earlier, cannot afford the $125,000 homes or the $250,000 homes, so they're struggling, they're surviving. So some of these properties, you wouldn't want to raise a family in those properties. And it's sad to say that, but that's the reality of it. You know, we are very active as far as trying to promote the demolition program, one for public safety and one to improve the quality of life. You know, that's the bigger picture. You know, you talk about economic development, but people fail to realize where you live, where you stay, where you play is part of economic development.
And we did get the Missouri Municipal League annual award for innovation for our program, and I thank Tim and Paul and his department for doing that, and the council for putting that forward. Tim, I wanted to ask you about these numbers, though. You have 6 in the demolition program for this year. How many more out there, if you had all the money and the time, how many more out there do you think that need to be added to this program?
You can easily add 15 to 20 more properties, just based on a visual inspection. You can see where the walls are buckling, you got holes in the roof. You know, people are living in those type of standard conditions, and that's,
Are there people actually living in places like that?
Yes.
Or are we talking abandoned use? Oh.
they're living in places with holes in the roof, holes in the wall, boarded up windows. You know, I'm not making this up. You can walk around or drive around town and see it yourselves. You know, like I made a comment to Paul, I had to go out and do some inspection or something else, and you can look at the older part of town and how those houses are dilapidated.
Okay, so you're telling me that if we have a house that should be demolished and there's a family living in it, what happens?
Well, if it's dangerous enough, we suspect it is dangerous enough and where it's inhabitable, we go out and try to do an inspection where we gain access to the inside, or like if it was a fire, the police, you know, was called out to an event, they would invite us into the home for an inspection. We've been in homes, or Paul has been in homes where there's electrical wire that's caused fire, or you know, sewage, raw sewage in the basement. We've been in houses like that. I haven't personally, but I think Paul and the fire chief have. So when we see stuff like that, we try to do everything in our power to see if we can relocate those people if it's inhabitable, or we try to find public housing for them.
Does it have to be a fire or sewer problem to be able to get inside those houses, or can you just like?
Well, no, it has an emergency call or something,
Yeah,
or a tenant, or if a tenant is living in a rental property and they say, hey, my landlord's not fixing something, they would invite us in, or like I said, the police or fire come in, they would invite us in. But if we have enough visual reason from the outside to do that, we can get an administrative search warrant, but we don't do that. I mean, we can do that, but we haven't.
How many of these lots that you have listed here have we sold? Do we have those advertised somewhere?
Yes.
Okay.
We got
We
another.
advertised 5 properties this, January. We didn't get any bids on, but we're getting ready to send them back out again.
Okay.
Yes, and last year we did, was it last year,
Yes.
Sally, we did some? We got rid of a couple of those lots.
Okay.
Which fund does your money come from to tear down these eyesores?
It comes out of general fund. We have a line item in the code enforcement department.
How many single-family homes have been rebuilt since you guys started this program?
Ish.
6 at least.
Yeah, probably 6.
So is there something we could do to make it more marketable or builder-friendly to knock that off?
I mean, we do everything in our power. I mean, we advertise in the local paper, we advertise, you know, we can probably extend our advertisement branch as far as trying to get local builders or, you know, near builders in near communities to take advantage of these lots. You know, so like, the whole purpose is to get rid of the nuisance, but at the same time is to build a single-family structure.
Right, because that's how you're gonna replace those houses.
Yes,
With those
correct.
families who built it through. Okay. Okay, thank you guys for getting all that stuff.
Manager, before we do proceed, I would like to make one clarification so there's no misunderstanding. Our general fund balance is good, better than those 6. However, the cash balance has had, part of that has come from a series of unusual situations, if I understand it right. We had an atrazine settlement that bumped it up. We had COVID, some COVID money. We had Century Bell. We can't keep depending on that. And healthy cash balances really end up stretching the road dollars farther. So for example, Orange Street came into play. We would not have applied for that grant years ago because there was no money. The way a grant works is you fund it all up front, 100%, and then once you complete it, as agreed, then you get your proportion back. So Orange Street happened, it ran over budget, I think twice. None of us liked it, but we still made it work. 7th Street, the tube collapsed, we had money in reserves for that. So it is important to have large reserves, it makes your dollars go farther because you can capture more of these grants. But if those reserves end up disappearing because we're not bringing in enough revenue, there's another thing that makes it worse. So, anyway, I wanted to make that clarification. Am I understanding it right, Director? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. And then the only last item I had was on council committee assignments. The council committee assignments were put out, and the mayor had signed that. The first thing is the Finance and Budget Committee, which is a committee of the whole, the entire council. And yet, you will see on the agenda the discussion of that. And we're obligated to do that because the council asked us to put it back on there. So we can have that discussion even after the appointment was made. So maybe, I think what the mayor said, maybe that was a tentative appointment based on your discussions. And that's why you'll see it again in the agenda. And that's all I have. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Are there questions or comments for the manager?
Well, thank you.
Thank you for all of you on your work at Cadence.
I believe that in the minutes of the last meeting, council asked to have the update on e-trucking.
Yes, we've been talking about. Tim, could you answer that question for us? What are your conversations there?
I've been in communication with Russ, what's his last name?
Knudsen.
Yes. I've been in contact with him and trying to set a date and time for him to give a public update to city council. I just haven't nailed down the date yet. But he is aware that you guys want an update from him.
For those who don't know, e-trucking is, it has a business out in our industrial development, and they've been there for some time.
Yes.
Watching what's going on.
From our conversation, he said things are moving forward. You know, it's the type of business that he's in. He can't divulge a lot of information to me, but he made sure with you guys. I don't know.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, that concludes the manager's report. I believe that both Mr. Gardis and Mr. Rummery are out of town. Did you have anything to add?
No, I didn't have anything from it.
Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is unfinished business. We have a second and final reading on Bill 2021-8.
Bill 2021-8, an ordinance for the city of Cameron, Missouri, authorizing a change in zoning district classification from R2 two-family residential to C2 general commercial for a 15-foot strip of land located at 1020 South Walnut, owned by Dr. Mark Carr.
Chair to entertain a motion to pass Bill 2021-8 on second reading by roll call.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Clerk will.
Becky Curtis.
Yes.
Julie Osmond.
Yes.
Roy Estes.
Yes.
John Ingram.
Yes.
Dennis M. Clark.
Yes. Bill 2021-8 passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Next item on the agenda, we have a discussion on the community projects.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. I'll come up here for a second time, which is kind of unusual, but this is a discussion in which council is going to need some recommendations from the staff is going to need a recommendation from the council because we're going to be looking forward to a budget amendment at the May 3rd meeting. And in order to do that, we'll have to have a committee meeting sometime before May 3rd of the Finance Committee to get their take on all of these issues. And right now, we have some numbers that we would like to show you, and we'll need to get some recommendations from you now to see how to proceed. And that will require some discussion. As you remember, we had the community projects discussion in October, and we did the first iteration, the first half of it, and we said we'd come back in April and give you the second half of it, and that's where we are now. So what I'd like to do is start out by talking about the goals and objectives. And what you can see now in front of you is the goals and objectives that the City Council set at the 2019 retreat. And I give that as some background for this because we're moving forward on all of those, and only 2 of those have not been relatively completed. One is establish a new inspection position, That we have on the agenda to talk at a council meeting when we talk about code enforcement, new inspection position later on. The other was the follow-through on a utility rate analysis. Now that we've had a full year or more without the prison crossroads, the utility department now can do a utility rate analysis, or we can task it out and hire an outside consultant to do that, and we'll bring that back for a council decision. The next slide is the 2020 council objectives at that council retreat, and in those, almost all of those have been worked on to some degree or another, but some, like supporting the motel tax, we've done what we can, and that is in front of the state legislature now. We had improved city streets and improved livability. We've talked about city streets and livability, and one of the things we're talking about now in livability is the community projects that we talked about in October. Can you give me the next slide, please? Okay, this was the community projects list that we had, and I put this up because this is what you left us with in October, and we had 23 items on there, and the reason we had those 23 items was those were all of the different items that the city council wanted to talk about, and we asked the public for their things that they would like to talk about, and so we came up with a very large list, but the council narrowed it down to these 23 items. And then we talked about it in the council meeting on 14 September, and you can see what that column shows, is that shows we had $1.5 million worth of projects, but we only had $232,000, and so what we did was we earmarked about half of $146,000 for these projects. Now we've done some of those, and then there's some money left over, and now I've gone back out to the council and the public and said, okay, now for the second iteration, what would you like to do? So I've asked Carmen to give us a rundown here on what has been spent now, or what has been committed, and what is left over that you now can make a decision on. We've asked you for some of your other projects you might like to add to this list.
So in September, we made the $146,000 commitment for the main projects that council decided that we should proceed on. So as of today, or April 12th, we have dispersed $6,500 for the chamber. We collaborated with the chamber on the banners along Walnut, and I believe the Main Street flags have come in, but they're not put up yet, so they have not been paid for. So the $6,500 has been dispersed. We are still committed to doing the community center parking lot. $40,000 will get us started to like the front of the entrance and a little bit farther back. But to do all the way around the building would be a much larger price project. The image improvements, we're planning on $15,000, and that first $15,000 would probably entail most of the golf course fence if council decides to proceed with that project. The large garrison flag, that will be out of the new community park, and that will not be fully operational or constructed for at least another year. We had a small beautification project around some of the stop signs and stoplights where we got rid of the weeds and we put some a thin layer of concrete overlay on some of those raised islands, and that project is complete. So as of April 12th, we had spent or obligated $101,000. But our original budget was $232,000. One of the council members suggested moving $65,000 into the street improvement contract line item. And if council so desires to do that, that will be a definite part of the next budget adjustment.
Why don't you go to the next slide, there, Zach? That shows the 65,000.
So if we make the commitment for the 65,000, that would leave us with 36,000 remaining. The lower items in red are just ideas from council and staff on other projects we could do. But they total 111,000, just those items in red.
And I think the council is aware of all of these, but I would add a couple things. The Eagle Lake struts for the bridge, that completes the rustic trail all the way around Eagle Lake. We had a bid for those, which would complete the bridge over the spillway on the north end of Eagle Lake, so you can completely walk around the lake. That bid was $27,000. And the reason you see 17,000 there is because we had 10,000 already in the lake project, so we include that in the money that's already spent. So 17,000 then would get us around the lake. The business park, we originally had $10,000 signed for, which you see on the previous chart. And we added 14,750 to that. That would give us a total of 25,000. And in talking to some people who are working on that, they thought we could get those two signs, one on each side of the business park for 25,000. And so they're working on that. The 10,000 wasn't going to get us what we needed. And then at the cemetery board meeting last week, they had talked about the founding fathers plot was the McCorkle plot was in bad repair and wanted to be able to work on that. That's what the 5,000 is for. The memorial plaques, these are the ones that we have a person who's willing to donate 7,000 and is going to raise 7,000 and is asking for 7,000 from the city. So that gives us 21,000, and those are memorial plaques, which would be historical markers around the city that would designate where certain famous people had come, where Harry Truman gave a speech or some things like that. And the Historic Preservation Society has got a list of those, and will do the write-up of the individuals. So that's $21,000, but we only have to pay $7,000. We also then down there have 10,000 for trail improvement. That would mostly be parking at the area where the rustic trail begins. And then there's some other trail amenities, fire pits and seating. Each of those is about $5,000, and so we could put 2 of them out there. We also have a billboard project, which the chamber is working with us, and that would be a couple of different options. One would be a sign that changes, and another would be a permanent sign located at the Reservoir Road. And then another item was the old middle school parking lot. The paving of that is kind of the same as the paving of the community center, about $40,000, and you're not sure what that might amount be until you get a bid, but we could earmark that amount. That again is one of the things where the old middle school, the Historic Preservation Society owns that lot, but the city uses it for many, many things, and they certainly do not have the money to improve that. But since it serves oftentimes as a city parking lot for city activities, it's been recommended that we could put $40,000 into that. Well, when we add all of these things up now that are on our list, it's $111,000, out of which there's $36,000 in that fund. And so our question now is to the city council is, how would you like us to proceed in that? And so we can then bring this and some other discussions back to the finance committee meeting, which we will get scheduled soon.
So if I understand it right, if we did everything, you've got 37,000 left, and if all these were funded, it'd be 111,000, so it would be about 80,000 over budget, and that's with us also putting 65,000 in street payments.
Yes, that's the way I see it. Would you see that about that, Carmen?
Personally, I'm fine with that. I don't know how the rest of the council feels.
When you say you're fine with that, you mean then what you would suggest is taking that extra $80,000 from some reserves, but take from reserves and put it in to complete the list on the project, okay?
That would be my take. I don't know how everyone else feels.
Well, I have a couple concerns. Can we go back one
Sure.
slide?
Zach?
Yeah, that would be it. Okay, so one of the projects that's on here is the large garrison flag project. Okay, $40,000. As you said, we don't have any place to put that flag right now. And so my suggestion would be to move the large garrison flag project to the future, which we have other projects that we have moved to the future, and add that money to the $36,000. I'm not saying I don't want the garrison flag project, I'm just saying, why spend that money now, or why have that money now? We could use it on something else and move it to the future, okay?
Sure, and then what we would do in the future, we would still have a due out, that means we take $40,000 out of the reserve later next year or something to pay for that.
Okay, my other concern is the industrial park sign. We have $10,000 down there right now, and then on the next slide, is that, are we adding $14,750 to that?
Yes, that's right. The group that was working on that, we originally said $10,000, and so Tim went out and got some bids for $10,000, and the group that was working on this, the committee that was appointed for that, did not think that was adequate, and so they went out and kind of designed a bigger amount, but went out and saw what it would cost to do that, and I asked them, they don't have any bids yet, but throw a number out. They thought $25,000 or $30,000 would do it. So
Okay.
we had 10.
I think our first priority at the industrial park is the utilities, and I believe, Zach, you mentioned that they'd be done by the end of this fiscal year.
Yes.
So my suggestion would be to move that to the future. Once we get the utilities out there, then we can look at that.
Okay.
And on that sign, I would want to confirm this with Mr. Gargis. I think what they're looking at is trying to model the welcome to Cameron signs that you see out on 36 and 35, and trying to keep that continuity. So those are nice looking signs. But yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with what you said there.
Are there eventually gonna be a plan to be 2 signs there at the business park? Is that the
It's
plan?
for two.
It's for 2, okay. It was plural, I didn't know. Okay.
Now, we periodically get some grant money for trail expansion improvements.
Drew has been very active for us in applying for grants, but we're, he's applying. It doesn't mean we get them, but if we would get them, that would,
Most of the trail out there that's currently there has been through grant.
a good portion of the trail, yes.
Okay.
Are you working on one now, Drew? A grant for?
Yes, excuse me. We submitted one, this year's application was due mid-February, so we submitted one to continue around Sunrise Lake, more asphalt. But yeah, most of the trails were done with grant money or partnerships.
And when will we know the results of the?
April, May, we're still waiting on one from the park from a year and a half ago.
Okay.
COVID put the state behind, I think, too, with their committees getting together to review.
I guess my other question with that would be, would some of these qualify for possible grant money next year versus just us paying for them?
Possibly, I'm not familiar with some of these, but through community development block grants, a lot with the economic development, or type of community development, and that also includes infrastructure. That's what Orange Street, that Mayor Clark mentioned, Orange Street was a community development block grant.
I'm going from memory, I think that bridge over Sunrise Lake was 90,000, and so we would be looking at 27 for a bridge to get across the spillway on Eagle Lake.
That's
Well, that's
pretty close, yeah.
The Eagle Lake Trail would be different than what we see at Sunrise. or at least that's what I would anticipate. There is currently a road that can be used as a trail that goes to the pump house. And it's set up, we need to have some gravel for a parking lot and some signage so that people know it. But you can go all the way back to the pump house. So if you go on the east side of Eagle Lake, that's probably will be more primitive or maybe road millings or different things, but you still have to get across that spillway. Well, if we can do that for 27,000, and just as we have road millings or whatever, we can just keep adding to that trail and lengthening it and taking it from more primitive to something similar to the west side of Eagle Lake would be what would occur to me anyway.
Okay, well, if I could,
What do you need from us?
yeah, if I could summarize that a little bit, I just.
I have some
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine, I just wanted to make sure everybody was finished with the questions we were asking. Okay, first of all, I'd like to know what $65,000 does to our streets and do. Just as kind of a, what can, I thought I texted you today about this.
That would be if we put $65,000 back in the street improvement fund.
Right.
Yeah, I apologize, I didn't receive a text.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Right now, what we've been doing, talking with city managers, we've been looking at, and again, street maintenance is best first, worst last. Because you can invest a little bit of money to really improve the lifespan through doing preventative maintenance on the street. So, through some of our newer streets, we've been looking at a rejuvenator, which is applied in typically years 1 and then again in 3 to 5. So, we put together a list, a quantity, and just got back an estimate to do the rejuvenator on the last 4 years of newer streets, I think.
And, I mean, ballpark, what does something like that cost? Because that's something we as a city should have been doing after we invested our tax for those new streets.
Sure. Yeah, and then we'll figure out the quantity, whether it's a rejuvenator, regular lights, to where we get to 65,000 or close to it.
Okay. My other question, and this probably goes to you, is I'm seeing that we are taking money into these different improvements, but yet at the same time, when it comes to the bidding of them, they're quite more than what we as a city have originally said that we would use. What happens then?
And so if we receive like a grant, and a grant for 200,000, and all the bids come in at 350, is that what you're asking?
Well,
Then that difference would have to come out of fund reserve, or be set in the budget as something.
Or you could reject the bids and send them out again, or you could not do the project. You have full authority to do that, because sometimes you don't know until the bids come back.
okay, so in other words, this stuff that we're voting on and looking at today could be very different in the reality world.
Yeah, it could be, that certainly is our best guess on these, but for example, $40,000 for the garrison flag, well, we have some estimates on that, and the hospital did one, and so we have some pretty good guesses, so that's probably about right, but yes, it could come back different than that, and when that happens, we'll have to bring it back to you with the recommendation and how we would do it one way or the other. Well, I don't do math on the fly here. I rely upon Carmen and Jim to do that. But generally, what it looks like to me is, as the mayor said, it looked like we were about $80,000 short to come out of the reserve. But if we took the $24,000 out now and put that back to $24,000 for the signs and delayed that, and then we delayed the $40,000 for the garrison flag, that saves $64,000. So it only puts us about $20,000 out of reserve and do all the other things on the list. That sounds to me like kind of what I heard.
And that's still with continuing to put the 65,000.
That's right.
And we're at a fairly high spot because we got some money, extra money coming in this year.
Right, we have received a lawsuit settlement from CenturyTel, and then we also received funds from Clinton County for COVID reimbursement. So that has really helped build the general fund cash balance at this point in time.
Are we expecting any more money?
Not from the counties, I am not from the counties, but I believe there is other instruments out there that is coming down through the state of Missouri. We have not been informed as to how or when those funds will be to us, so we don't know, or really the true amount that we will receive.
Well, this was good information for the council, thank you very much. What happens is we have the budget adjustment number 2, which we're scheduling for May 3rd. So when we talk about the committee of the whole in a few minutes, I think we need to talk about scheduling that committee meeting to talk about that, because we have, I think, about $250,000 worth of budget adjustments to make. So when we bring that back to the finance committee, we'll include this here. So this is not a vote on it now. We have the guys who prepare that along with the rest of the budget adjustment for that committee meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you'll put whatever resolution you need on the agenda.
Yes, we'll do that after that. We'll bring that back on the 3rd, the next council meeting with the resolution for the budget adjustment and this.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, that concludes that discussion. The next one is a discussion of the Finance and Budget Committee. I think we have decided to just do it as a committee of the whole unless there are objections from the council. Okay, that concludes that discussion.
Well, there's one more thing if I could add to that.
Sure.
Because what happens is we wanted to have a finance committee meeting then prior to the meeting on the 3rd, where we bring this back to the finance committee with all of the other adjustments. And so what we're suggesting is the day for that, and I have heard it's thought that perhaps we could do it on Monday the 26th. That would be a week from today, and it would be the finance committee, but it's a committee of the whole, so it would be everybody here. And I'm not asking for commitment now, but we'll come back and talk to each of you, see if that time would work, maybe 5 o'clock to 5:30 for a committee meeting. We'll bring that budget adjustment back to you to include this information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes unfinished business. Next item on the agenda is new business. We have approval of the minutes of the March 15, 2021 regular session. Chair would entertain a motion that we pass those minutes.
So moved. Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries, 5 in favor, 0 opposed.
I think we actually had 4 in favor and 1 abstention.
Oh, that's right, thank you. Good catch, appreciate it. All right, next item on the agenda is the audit presentation. Mr. Williams, thank you.
Thank you very much for waiting for this period of time to come up.
It's a fascinating accounting whole meeting. It's terrific. But I'm gonna bore you with some more numbers, I guess. Yeah. So this is the audit for the year ended September 30, 2020, and we've issued 2 reports. One looks like this. One looks like this. So does everybody have a copy or? Okay. Well, good. Okay. So what I'd like to do is flip through the bigger report. That's our booklet. It contains the audited financial statements, our audit report, and things like that. Well, by the way, my name is Mike Williams. I'm the partner in charge of the city's audit. So happy to be here tonight. But what I'll do is I'll just flip through here and tell you what I think is important or different from last year, and then take questions as we go along, or questions at the end is fine too. Okay, so anyway, past the table of contents, the first thing is the independent auditor's report. I want to mention a few things on here. The first section says that we've audited the financial statements, so that's the basic section of this letter. The next part is about management's responsibility. It says management's responsible for the amounts and disclosures. And the next section says that we've audited the financial statements. It gives a little bit about what an audit is. And then the top of page 2, the next section is the opinions paragraph, and I think that's the important one. That says that it says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. So there's no modifications to the report or qualifications, and it's also called a clean opinion.
And it's similar to what the city's received before, but anyway, I think that's important, so, that's good. There's some information about the other parts of the report, through page 3. And then page 4 begins the management's discussion and analysis. But what I was gonna talk about there starts on pages 6 and 7. So pages 6 and 7 have information of all the funds blended together on a full accrual basis, like a real high-level review. And there's more detail of all the funds further in the back of the report, which we'll get into. But just to mention, on page 6, so page 6 is like a balance sheet. It has the assets, deferred amounts, liabilities, and the net position. So assets are things that the city owns, like cash and investments, and then there's capital assets, which are the vehicles, equipment, infrastructure, things like that. And then there's columns for governmental activities. The governmental activities are primarily the general fund, transportation, parks, things like that, business type activities. Those are like business, those are more like businesses, such as water, sewer, electric type funds. And then there's the total. So you can see overall that the total assets on the right-hand side of the page, around $65,584,000, compared to about $66,074,000 the previous year. So some decrease. I have my note that that's less than 1%. However, so those are the assets, and the liability section shows about total liabilities of $14,924,000 compared to $15,446,000 the prior year, so down about $500,000. So overall, then the bottom line, net position, that's supposed to be the net financial position, shows about $51,293,000 at the end of the fiscal year compared to $50,143,000. So some increase in the overall net financial position, but not a significant change, just pretty close to even compared to the prior year on total assets, total liabilities, and total net financial position. So how do we get there? I think that shows more on page 7. Page 7 has the same column set up for governmental activities, business type, and totals. The revenues for the governmental activities show about $7,419,000, expenses around $5,760,000. So this shows overall that there is an improvement in the governmental funds net financial position. And then the business type activities show an overall decrease in net financial position, about $507,000 this year. It was around negative $487,000 last year also. And then the total shows that same $1,150,000 increase in total net financial position for the year. So this gives some information about the changes from the prior year. Just again, this is a big picture, high-level perspective, and we can see the various changes in the revenues and the expenses. Okay, so that's big picture stuff. What I was going to talk about next is some more detailed information, which begins on page 14. So page 14 is the balance sheet for the governmental activities. So the governmental activities, again, are things like the general fund, stormwater and transportation, so fire, sales tax. And there's a list of smaller funds in the back, and those are called the non-major funds. But overall, it shows the total general fund, and we're talking about cash, and a lot of times we refer to fund balance. So since we're having an accounting review today, just to talk about that a little bit more, the top line shows the general fund cash and investments about $1,895,000. And other assets of the general fund include things like sales tax, property tax, those amounts that are collected shortly after the end of the year, but haven't been collected in cash yet. And so then the total assets of the city around $2,916,000 compared to total cash investments around $1.9 million. Then the liabilities are things that the funds owe. So things like bills that come in after the end of the year to get paid after the end of the year, or payroll that gets paid after the end of the year. Those are liabilities of the city. Those total about $485,000. So then the difference between the assets and liabilities and deferred amounts, that's called fund balance. So it's like retained earnings for a regular company. It's not your cash, it's not all your assets. It's the difference between everything that you own, which is your assets, and those things that you owe, which are the liabilities. And that total then is fund balance. So this shows total fund balance around $2,395,000. However, there's different parts of the fund balance too. The fund balance is, part of that fund balance can't be spent. The first couple of sections talk about non-spendable fund balance, which is inventory and land covered for resale. So you can see there's certain amounts that are, those aren't spendable because you've already purchased them, those are assets. And then there's amounts that are restricted. The general fund doesn't have any restricted amounts, but all the other funds are special revenue type accounts. They come from special taxes, either the stormwater tax or the transportation improvement tax, the municipal fire tax, things like that. So those are restricted accounts. And then the general fund has things that are committed. So there's an amount committed for capital outlay, which goes through the city's budget process every year, and that's the amount set aside for that. And then there's also amounts, according to accounting standards, we have to set aside if the city budget shows a use of fund balance in the next fiscal year. And that's the $99,290. So the budget for the 2021 fiscal year showed a $99,000 deficit. So that's that assigned portion there. So all the fund balances and the unassigned balance then is $1,936,000. So that's like accounting 101 for balance sheets for governmental activities. You got cash, you got other receivables, you got liabilities, you got a total fund balance, but then part of that fund balance is restricted for other things. And you can see that kind of information from the other funds on the page. Now those are governmental activities. Let's see, we'll go ahead and go over page 16. The other governmental activities, revenues, expenditures, sounds like you're familiar with these, but I like to pick on the general fund. It's the main operating fund of the city. Shows total revenues around $4,350,000 for the fiscal year. Shows total expenditures around $5,351,000. So more expenses than revenues by about $1 million. But there are some other sources and uses related to the lease proceeds, the lease transaction. So the overall net decrease in the fund balance for the year was $416,000. So that's what the fiscal year September 30, 2020 was. And you can see the activity for the other funds. There are decreases in other funds also. A lot of that information is provided in additional information in the management's discussion and analysis report. And then overall, on the right side of the page, we can see the total net change in fund balances of negative $868,000. But overall, all fund balances still had positive amounts at the end of the year, but there were uses of many of that fund balance during the fiscal year. So that's the governmental funds. The next funds I was going to talk about is on pages 18 and 19. And these are the business type activities, again, electric, water, sewer, solid waste type funds. A balance sheet for that is on page 18, but I was going to mention on page 19 that the revenues and expenses are broken down into operating revenues, operating expenses, and then other types of non-operating revenues and expenses. So just to kind of jump to the bottom of the page, it shows change in that position. So electric has negative $316,000, water and sewer and solid waste both have negative amounts. But there's still a positive net position reported here, and there's cash amounts disclosed on the previous page too. So there's still positive amounts, it's just some use of reserves for those funds. So that's the proprietary funds. There's a reconciliation of cash on pages 20 and 21 on cash flow statement. So like a regular company, business type activities have a cash flow statement. See, the next page in, page 22 is a summary of the agency funds, which are the court appearance bonds. And then notes are the financial statements. After that then, page 23 begins the notes to the financial statements. And note A is a summary of significant accounting policies. And they're accounting policies, so policies don't change much from year to year. So I was going to skip those and jump into pages 30 and 31. Because this is the first detailed note to the statement. So cash investments, sometimes you want to know what your investments are in. It's the top of page 31. And page 30, there's a state law that says that the cash in the bank either has to be secured by FDIC or other pledge collateral. And so this says that you're in compliance with that, that law, that your bank balances are entirely secured collateral. So that's good. On top of page 31 then has a disclosure related to the investments, which in your case are CDs and money market funds, so nothing too exciting there. Page 33, I actually don't talk about this a whole lot either, but since you brought it up, This is a summary of the capital assets. So capital assets, again, are things like the infrastructure, building equipment, things like that. And the top part of the page is, the top part of the schedule there says capital assets not being depreciated. So under accounting principles, we have land and construction in progress. That's construction in progress, so it hasn't been placed in service yet. The land that you purchased, we don't depreciate that, and we don't depreciate construction until it's placed in service. The next part of the page then has capital assets being depreciated. So there's things on here like buildings, improvement, equipment, the publications, other things, and infrastructure. So the biggest thing is infrastructure. And then the last section of that schedule is depreciation. It says less accumulated depreciation for buildings, improvements, equipment, things like that. And you can kind of compare, sometimes what you do is you look at the total assets placed in service for the year versus the amount of depreciation. Because if your assets are depreciating faster than you're replacing them, then that generally means that you have the value of your assets are decreasing, and in the long run, you'll have to replace those assets. Now, it's really hard to tell I can't tell from all your streets and everything just by looking at this one schedule. You have to look at this also with multiple years. But this is a good schedule to look at to tell if you're replacing your assets or not. In this case, you had about $1 million of increases in capital assets for those placed in service, and about $1 million of depreciation for the year. But there are things like infrastructure. If you break this down, there's infrastructure. We added $280,000, but the depreciation was $380,000. So that section does show some more depreciation than replacement in the current year. So anyway, just a little bit more on capital assets. You can see that type of information also on pages 34 and 35 for business-type activities. And then I was going to jump to page 36. So page 36 is important because this is the long-term liability of the city. This is the certificate of participation, the new lease purchase agreement for the animal facilities was a new liability that was added during the current year, and other leases that the city has for police and fire, things like that. The bottom of the page then has the business-type activities for the water and sewer bonds primarily. So also it's important that the money that you produce has to be able to pay down this liability. That's a fixed cost every year. And those fixed costs then are shown on the next several pages. Page 37 has that schedule in the middle of the page of the requirements to be paid for the certificates of participation. And the next couple of pages also have information related to the leases. So, and then the revenue bonds are at the top of page 39. So those are other required liabilities that the city's going to have to pay for multiple years into the future, and those schedules are listed here. So I think that's important for long-term accounting budgeting. Okay, let's see. So then the pension begins on page 41. Note E says pension plan. The city's pension plan is the state loggers plan. There's some general information on that through page 43. But what I was going to mention is on page 44. There's a schedule of changes in net pension liability. So there's 3 columns on here. That first column is the pension liability. So that's the total liability that the pension has. And then there's a planned fiduciary net position, and that's the assets available to pay that first liability. And then the net pension liability, that's the difference between the liability and the assets. And so this is a negative number, so it says it's an asset. So actually at the beginning of the year, there was about $1,395,000 asset, and at the end of the year, it's still pretty close, but it's still an asset of about $25,000. And that's just based on loggers' actuarial calculations of those changes in those various numbers. So, what I take from this is, yeah, there's some decrease for the year, but that you don't have a significant pension liability shown on the financial report for this fiscal year. So that's good. Let's see here. Note F, deferred compensation. That's an employee's pension plan, page 46. Has information about inter-fund due from amounts and advances, some disclosures on property taxes, land held for resale. Risk management's on the bottom of page 47, that's insurance. Top page 48 has other commitments and contingencies related to things like the landfills and grants. Page 49 has information on operating leases, restricted net position, and the joint venture, primarily the Great Northwest, I forgot what you call it. Some activity on that, top of page 50. The subsequent events after the end of the year, there were some transactions entered into by the city, so those are required to be shown on here. That's note O. Some tax abatement disclosures. That rounds out the end of the disclosures for the financial statements and the notes to the statements. After that, then, not to go into too much more, but just to mention on page 53. Page 53 provides a little more detail. It has the original budget for the city for the year. It has the final amended budget after all the budget amendments, the actual revenues and expenditures, and the difference, that over-under budget is the difference between the final budget and the actual numbers. So, we can see overall, just looking at this, the total revenues are under budget by about $202,000, but total expenditures are under budget by about $219,000. And so, bottom line shows about $462 difference, so pretty close. Anyway, that's the general fund budget to actual. I won't talk about all these other ones. The list of the smaller funds is on page 61 and 62. This page 62 does have the new public safety fund listed on here, so that's where that amount is. So, I think that's all I was going to mention related to this report. Oh, no, there's one more. The very last sheet in here is called a report on internal controls and compliance. I was going to mention that also, but because auditors, when they come in, they don't just crunch all the numbers that are in the front of the report from the accounting department, but we're also required to look at internal controls and compliance. And if there is any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, those would have to be reported here. And also the same is true for compliance. If there's any significant or weaknesses or material deficiencies with compliance issues, we'd have to report those. But the last sentence of the compliance paragraph says, the results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance that are required to be reported under government standards. So there's none of those items. But we did have this other report, and there's first several pages, there's some generic information. There's a list of adjusting journal entries that we came up with during the audit. And then the very last sheet of that are 2 comments and recommendations that we had for the audit during the year. The first comment has to do with additional documentation in the accounting procedures manual. And the second comment just has to do with a review of various code sections to potentially update those. So those are the 2 comments we had. So they're not significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. They're just other comments that we came up with during the work of the audit. I have a note that we had 4 comments last year. The other 2 comments last year related to adjustments and completion of the bank rec timely. So we did not have those issues this year, so we just have the 2 comments this year. So that's the 2 reports, and be happy to take any other questions or comments on those.
Questions, comments?
Thank you very much for that detailed report, and I did want to go back on the comments and recommendations. And one of the things we had last year was, you noted the need for capital asset policy. And one of the things we were going to do last year was to develop a policy whereby we could inventory all of the assets and make sure that we had those on hand. Some things are kind of used during use, like chainsaws will wear out and that sort of thing, but other things like the mechanics tool sets, the socket wrench sets and stuff, should last for the long term. And I will tell the council that we were going to develop that by going through and inventorying each department this year for those things that we should be accounting for, to make sure things don't walk off on us. And I do apologize that we were not able to do that this year because of COVID, where we stopped having the departments intermix because of passing the virus, and so we had to delay that, but we will take that up again this coming year and do that in accordance with this recommendation.
My sense is your place.
Yeah. You got a clean opinion on this financial statement, no significant deficiencies. A few comments, but that's not unusual.
Right.
We did receive cooperation from the finance department too. I think it's something important for the board to know.
Great. Thank you. Good. No other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you for the report.
Oh, yeah, happy to. Thank you.
Presentation. Next, we have an agreement with Main Street.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And what I wanted to point out on this is not actually doing the agreement with them, but what had happened was I had met with Main Street for the last, probably a couple of months, to work out what we might do to work on the buildings on 3rd Street that the inspector had determined to be dangerous buildings. And the Main Street Association has come up with what they think would be a workable agreement, pending an agreement by the City Council to back them up. They asked if we could schedule a joint meeting with them, and at that time bring back a draft agreement that both parties could discuss. So this isn't the time to actually discuss that, but what I'm recommending is that we do that joint meeting with Main Street, and we've given you the memo there that you all have on your desk, which is what we had talked to about Main Street. If you'd like to do that meeting, then what we would propose is bring back an agreement that we will have taken to Main Street and brought to you, so that we can have that worked out, and then having a joint meeting to work out the final details of that and bring it back to both groups. So if you would like to do that, what I'm suggesting then is what we do is we use the meeting of the Finance Committee on the 26th, and since we're bringing everybody together, we could use that as a date to have the joint meeting with Main Street and work out this agreement with them to what might work for both parties, and then we can follow that with the Finance Committee meeting to work on the budget adjustment for the meeting on May 3rd. And that would be my recommendation to you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I just think that we need to do this as soon as possible. The owners of the 4 buildings are still paying taxes and insurance on them, and I'm sure that they would like to sign an order as soon as they can.
Yes, absolutely.
No matter who it's to.
Yes, and I think if we can have the meeting, the joint meeting on Monday the 26th, and if we came to an agreement, whatever that might be, then we could bring that back to the council for signature on the an action on the 3rd, and I think we could get to Main Street to have them to act on it by that time as well, and so we could have this completed by the next council meeting. And I recognize the urgency of that for all the reasons we've talked about. Okay, based on that, we will contact each of you then separately to see if a joint meeting on the 26th would work, or we'll contact Main Street as well and set that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda, we have a first reading of Bill 2021-12.
Bill 2021-12, an ordinance for the City of Cameron, Missouri, approving an agreement by and between the City of Cameron and the Clinton County Commission and Clinton County Collector for tax collection services.
Thank you. Chair, I entertain a motion to pass Bill 2021-12 on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
This was brought to me by Clinton County. They have new commissioners, and as such, they would like to renew the agreement with the new commissioners on it. It's basically exactly the same as the old agreement for them to collect our taxes for us. The fees haven't changed.
How much are the fees for that?
It's 3%.
I think it turned out pretty favorable for us, didn't it?
I was gonna say,
And was it the same for both counties?
Yes.
For us?
I think it was pretty close to the same.
I would note that those fees are set out in state law for those sort of collections, so that's not really a negotiation point, that's just a kind of automatic check box.
But we were pleased with that all the way. And I see the staff is recommending approval, so.
Yeah, previously our collections were, annually, we collected about 88% of what we billed out, and now we're collecting 98%. So even with the fees that we pay for it, we're still way ahead.
All right, that's what we need. Okay, if there's no other questions, comments, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of passing Bill 2021-12 on first reading, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries, 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Next item on the agenda, we have the first reading of Bill 2021-13.
Bill 2021-13, an ordinance approving an agreement between the City of Cameron, Missouri and CMG Graveside for the purpose of cemetery interments at the 5 city cemeteries.
Okay. Thank you. Chair, I entertain a motion to pass Bill 2021-13 on first reading by roll call. Not by roll call, just on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Director.
Yes, thank you. The resolution or ordinance before you is for the CMG Grave Services. Just a history, in 2002, the city started to bid out the opening and closing of the graves. And CMG Graveside Services is a local Cameron company and was the lowest and best bid in '02. We've been working with them since that time, since 2002. We do this every 2 years. 2019 was the last time we bid it out. And this time there was no price increase on any of their services. The cemetery board met and recommends approval by the city council for the agreement for another 2-year period for opening and closing graves with CMG.
Okay. Questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of passing Bill 2021-13 on a first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you, Director. Next item on the agenda, we have a full reading on Bill 2021-14.
Bill 2021-14, an ordinance of the City of Cameron, Missouri, vacating a portion of the alley located within lots 9, 10, 11, and 12 in block 64 of the original town of Cameron, Missouri, as amended.
Thank you. Chair, I entertain a motion to pass Bill 2021-14 on first reading.
So moved.
Second. Discussion.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council, City Council. You guys should have received in your packet an ordinance to vacate a portion of an alley for new commercial development. City staff has worked with Missouri Department of Transportation to allow access to our new development that's going to be located at
I might
121.
just add, there was an amended version on the table.
Yes. Yes, you guys should have received an amended version with correction of the date and some language on there. But city staff has been working with MoDOT on allowing new access off of South Walnut for a new commercial development. And you know, that's pretty much it.
Are there any questions, comments?
Are all interested parties obviously are okay with all this?
The city staff's worked with the property owners. A letter was sent out to all the adjoining property owners for that alley. We were contacted by several property owners, and the city staff has worked out an agreement with those property owners to try to appease them.
So I think the answer is yes, in talking with them, of course, everybody has different opinions on both of those things, but I have signed an agreement with the most affected property owner, where the city will give certain things to them so that they are okay. It doesn't require us to do that, but we wanted to make sure that this was a win-win for everything, and we gave something to all of the property owners so that they could be compensated for the difficulties that they may have, and I believe we have an agreement with them.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of passing Bill 2021-14 on first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair would entertain a motion to suspend the rules and pass Bill 2021-14 on second reading by roll call.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
I'd like to comment on that, Mayor. One of the reasons that we are asking to do this in the full reading is because the developer there is on a timeline because of their state permit that they have to be operating, I believe, in August. And so they're beginning the demolition now, but they need to move rapidly on it. The Planning and Zoning Commission said that they would hold a special meeting tomorrow night to approve the site plan based on the fact that the council would then approve the ordinance for the vacation. And so that's why we're asking to do the full reading tonight, so the planning and zoning will have that approved for them for their meeting tomorrow night.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, if there are no other questions, comments, clerk will call the,
Julie Osmond,
Yes.
Roy Estes,
Yes.
John Ingram,
Yeah.
Dennis M. Clark,
yes,
Becky Curtis.
Yes.
motion carries 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Next item on the agenda, we have a proclamation for Arbor Day. Is this, just read it from here?
Do you want to talk about it, or do you just want me to read that?
Whichever you prefer, Mayor, do you want to get a brief statement? If you want to do the proclamation first, or I could, just,
Go ahead, go.
a brief overview is, with our Arbor Day, I know you'll discuss the proclamation, but Arbor Day is a nationally celebrated day. It's usually celebrated on the last Friday in April, but many states and cities do it on different days to coincide with planting time, season weather. For us, we do it, we were celebrating on the last Friday of April this year to coincide with the schedule of our schools. We work with Parkview. We'll also work with cooperation with the Cameron Intermediate School, hopefully this year the Cameron High School. We take out for our Arbor Day, we take a kindergarten class out and plant a tree. So this year's kindergarten class will plant a tree, and due to COVID-19 last year, we'll also take this year's first grade class out and plant a tree for the first graders this year. So, and then after the kindergarten class plants a tree, we bring them back through 5th grade. We take a picture with the class as kindergartners, and then each year we take them back so you can take the picture, you can see how the kids have grown as well as the tree. Last year was the first year we would have had the kindergarten class through high school, which would have been the class of 2020. Unfortunately, we didn't get to take the seniors back out for a picture with the tree last year. So this year's class, the class of 2021, will be the first year that we'll have get to take the picture with from kindergarten all the way to seniors in high school. So we're really excited about that. Once the trees are planted, we'll put a plaque next to the tree for the class, this year's class of 2032 and 2033. Yeah. And then also, we'd like to say too that usually most years we get somebody to donate the trees for us. This year, both trees are going to be donated by Mass Healthy Woods. So that's, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. We have an Arbor Day proclamation. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas on March 8, 2021, Cameron, Missouri was once again named a 2020 Tree City, USA by the Arbor Day Foundation in honor of its commitment to effective urban forest management. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heat and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, reduce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable source, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. Pardon me. And whereas trees in our city increase the property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now therefore I, Mayor Dennis M. Clark, Mayor of the City of Cameron, Clinton and DeKalb Counties, and Caldwell Counties, Missouri, do hereby proclaim April 30th, 2021 as Arbor Day. And the City of Cameron and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. Further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this future generation. Dated 19th day of April 21. signing that, and I'll give that to the clerk. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda, we have resolution 2021-12.
Resolution 2021-12, a resolution authorizing the expenditure of funds for a community project, Veterans Memorial Golf Course fence.
Thank you. Chair, I entertain a motion to pass resolution 2021-12.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. Discussion?
Thank you very much, Your Honor. We had, according to Resolution 2034 in the fall, a direction for the staff to pursue certain community projects, and among those in Section 5 was image improvement, and specifically identified items to be negotiated with the golf course board. We did that, and this is a new vinyl fence along the First Fairway and Park Avenue. And we have a copy of the golf course minutes where the board approved us doing that project along there, and that's indicated in the minutes. So the city is now prepared to send this out to bid for an amount up to $15,000, which is included in the community projects that were committed for this past year during the first iteration, which you saw in the presentation that was given to you earlier this evening. It does identify in Resolution 2034 that we would bring that back for council approval, and so we're bringing that back now to you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Do we have anybody from the golf course? Board?
Not here, I guess.
I guess my problem is I just don't believe that a vinyl fence is going to hold up to. I've hit the posts and cables there all over the place. And there's a few community residents that have pretty hefty vinyl fences that get beat up pretty quick. So, right. So that is one of my bigger concerns, that either you move forward with the project, pay the money, 2 years, and half of them get holes, and then they come back for more money, which, don't get me wrong, I love the community golf, or the Cameron golf course out there. We're blessed to have it in our community. I don't want to cause them more heartache and pain down the road.
How would you feel if we just go ahead and authorize the expenditure of money, but let the manager work with the golf course to find a satisfactory solution?
And I could, in answer to your question, perhaps Drew could comment about the vinyl fence.
Okay.
Drew?
Yeah, the vinyl fence, I was one that attended the golf board meeting a couple weeks ago, Sunday. Can't remember the exact date, but that was one of the biggest concerns of the golf course, or the board also, was the maintenance of it. As part of the agreement, the golf board did vote unanimously to approve it, and move forward with it, but they asked for, I think the number was maybe like 24 extra rails. So working and talking to the fencing company, they did say that obviously if it's cold below freezing, you stand and tee off right at the fence or hit it, you're gonna break it. But for the most part, with driving parallel with it, that when the ball does hit it, it's not gonna be a hard enough force. But again, it can happen. You are right, it does happen. So that's why the board asked for extra posts and extra the actual railings themselves, which they would keep in one of their storage buildings. So if by some chance one of the rails did get broken from a golf ball or accident, that they could go back out and just replace the rail.
It would be on them, not us.
Well, part of the purchase of the $15,000 includes the length of it plus those extra rails, which I believe was somewhere around a couple dozen extra rails that they could keep in storage and just snap in and out.
Now, I'd also like to add that we do have an interested party here in the city who has volunteered to go out and believes that they can do some fundraising to also donate a good portion of this towards building that fence. So it's possible we could use the money that we've got and some of the money that was raised then to investigate a more substantial fence if the council would like to do that. We could do as the mayor suggested there and go back and look at it again, based on your, authorization to expend the funds.
Is there a different type of material that can be used, or if, what you're thinking of cost per good vehicle? Not what you're thinking of, but, you know, other than vinyl, would that be cost per good vehicle?
It would probably drive up the cost, yes. I think the idea where the vinyl came from, this is the exact same fence, that's currently at our cemetery. Sits on the north and the east side of the cemetery. We're on the two side cemetery now, so if you guys want to see what the fence looks like, it's the one that's out there now. So exactly the same type of fence.
The other thing I had was just that. I thought that there was gonna be two people putting money towards.
Yeah, and, I talked with them recently, and they are working on it. They would like to look at the design so they can have some pictures of design and raise money to accommodate that. They feel very confident though they will be able to do that and still be able to contribute some money to it. So it may be that this $15,000 maybe could be up to say $18,000 for a different kind of a fence, or it may be that the $15,000 could go down to $12,000, something like that. Based upon the bids we get and how much might be raised.
Is this the replacing the wood fence that's there on the north side?
And
No.
wire? I believe it's the one on the wooden wire down the first.
Okay, I'm sorry, I haven't made this, I have not been on there. Is that when you come out of the middle school,
Yeah.
it's all right there? There's a pretty long fence.
Right.
I went out and got pictures of it this week.
Is it,
What it looked like.
is it an open fence to read?
Yes, it's round,
Well, it is that we have now. Is the new one an open fence?
The total height of the split rail would be 36 inches, so there would only be two 8-inch rails. I believe they're 12-foot or 8-foot long sections. The plan is that we start at the clubhouse, pretty much follow the existing fence, except there's no pedestrian opening like there is now. Come back along the parking lot to Park Avenue, and then we would probably do an even offset all the way along. I think it's 12 feet off the back of the curb, where it's now kind of varies in distance. Remove some of the trees in there, then it goes the entire length of Park Avenue. There is a 20-foot kind of unmowed right now, unimproved right of way, so the fence would then go down to the south side of that right of way, back to the trees where the baseball fields are in the school district.
Okay, I guess my question, I have a couple of things to ask. The first one is something to say. Are we maybe not ready to vote on this yet? Do we want to wait and see if they earn? I mean, I agree, it's supposed to be a collaborative project. Do we want to make sure that they earn their part to put in with this? And the second part of that is, the city owns the golf course, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And we lease it to the membership.
Correct.
Okay, so have we ever done anything like this before for the golf course?
Yes, we have. A few years ago, we put $20,000 into building a new bridge across the creek down there. So we have a history of having done that sort of thing.
And I'm going from memory, I think either us or the park board helped with a heating and cooling system at one point, but that's it. I think so. I'm going from memory. One of the reasons I feel so passionate about this is this falls in the small thing that makes a big difference. So if you are selling your house and the weeds and the grass is tall and the front door is dirty, it makes sense to invest some money in a coat of paint and a mower. If you're selling your car, it makes sense to go ahead and clean it up in detail. It's the same car, it's the same house, but these small things, when you go to marketing, the amount of money that you get out of it, the amount of time it takes to market, this is in one of our high-profile areas. And anybody that's really investigating Camden is going to go out through there. We've got posts that are rotten, falling over. It's unsightly on the very northeast corner where it grows up. So for a small amount of money, relative, let's say 15,000, if the life of that is 30 years, it's $500 a year to give a shave and a haircut to one of the places that is our flagship. So I feel strongly about wanting to proceed forward and let the manager and the director work out things. But anyway, that's just my pick. How does everybody else feel?
I know for a fact, because I've read what the secretary, I believe she's secretary of the golf course, who actually signed the lease back in 2005, said that they did not ask for this fence.
That's true.
So if they haven't asked for it, I don't know if they're gonna be real motivated to get whatever funds is needed. And another thing, those posts that they have are very, very sturdy, very sturdy. If you have somebody in a car that goes past that, those fences are just final. I had a wooden one in front of my house at one time, and we had a car took it down. So let me tell you, the way it is now, I don't see it as an unsightly site. I see it as being able to see people golf, which I enjoy watching, and the fact that it is mowed. There's none falling over. There is one that is supported by steel rods from the fence, and I would say maybe let's fix that and make sure it keeps mowed. But if the golf course this was not even our idea, I wonder how wise it is to start a precedent in doing things that we're not even been asked for. I don't think that's a really good path to start walking down.
Golf course aside, it still is a very visible part of our community. And if you look at what, say, a McDonald's or Coca-Cola does, they are very conscious of the value of image and branding. And they protect it ferociously because they recognize its value. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about trying to find as many ways as we can to add value to this community and help us market ourselves. What we're trying to do, if you drive, if you go all the way through the Northwest, our competitors, Kearney, Lawson, Lathrop, Weston, Platte City, on and on. Cameron is trying to bring the whole package to the people that we want to attract here to pay for our stuff. And while Kearney has many things, I don't believe they have an aquatic center, and I know they don't have 1,100 acres approximately of parks and green space with 4 lakes and trails. So I think that if we do a good job of this and working on our image and all the other stuff, whether it's the lakes and all that, we can present the complete package. We all heard the financials earlier about the importance of finding new ways to bring additional commerce into this community. So I'm on the side trying to find a way to bring in more commerce.
Well, I think people who run through our streets to look at our community would think the potholes and the way in which there's so much alligator pavement out there, which is beyond almost repair, that I think that they can see whether or not what our priorities are. We do window dressing, but when it comes to really taking care of things that we are supposed to take care of as a city, I think our job is to take care of infrastructure, not window dressing.
Well, window dressing pays for infrastructure, and what I would say is, myself and former Councilman Ronnie Jack are the ones who drove the project for the hot patch machine. Hot patch machines have been around forever, but nobody wanted to bring it up because you just got beat up all the time anytime you want to make an improvement. And as far as the potholes, well, if you're using using the hot patch machine, which is what you want to do, because there's much more longevity to that repair, it's weather specific. If there's snow, if it's cold, if it's raining, I think anybody that wants to be fair will look at the winter we had and the spring we had. There's a limited amount of time to fix potholes because the weather hadn't cooperated. We have one machine and one crew. So, to me, I have supported the streets all the way along. I'm sitting there saying, we have to find a way to bring in more money.
I just have a question, you know, staying on focus with the fences now. We have a private citizen who's confident they can raise a significant amount of money to fund some of that $15,000. Have we gotten a ballpark figure of what they expect to be able to raise? Or?
Yeah, I think they were talking about $3,000, maybe 25% of the cost of it, or 30% of the cost of it.
Okay. So if we do 15 grand, that could more or less fund the whole thing, but it might actually be less because they would chip in 3, let's say.
If you remember what happened to the animal shelter, you weren't here,
Sure.
but that didn't work out very well either, so,
Staying on focus with the fences.
but I agree with you on
Sure.
that. But also, if that person wants to come to us and tell us that they're all on board for it, I'll listen to them.
Sure. I mean, I just would like some details about what they think they can raise before we, you know, I mean, that's a big part of this, I think. That's what, 20%, 25%?
Yes, it could be 25% of the whole cost. That would reduce our cost down. I think we got a bid of around 12,000, and the reason we said 15,000 here is because you're never quite sure what the bid is going to come in, and time goes on, things get expensive every day. But if it was at 12,000 and we got 3,000, that would be down to 9,000 for us and 3,000 donation.
Can we start that process without spending all that yet? I guess.
I second.
Well, we have a motion and a second before the council now, so what you have to vote on that, but you could vote to postpone this then, pending a report back on what those, that other volunteer donations might be. And at the same time, we could also answer your question about maybe some more substantial fencing, which might be a little more expensive, but we might get with that money as well.
What, does anybody have any idea what it would cost to replace the fence that's there with like newer posts and newer wire? Does anybody have any idea what that would cost? Has that been discussed?
It wouldn't have been discussed because they don't see it as a problem. So this is we've made this our problem, and we're just wanting to throw money at it without really looking into it. So, I mean, if you want to get the golf course on page and have them look into it, which is, I think, the way it normally works, rather than the city getting ahead and doing something we want to do and they haven't even asked for. I just don't think that's very wise.
Yeah, but I think there's more to the story.
Oh, okay.
I do. So maybe that's what we need to find out, because I think there's more to the story.
So the best place to proceed is what?
I was going to, excuse me, I can't answer that question, because I do have a copy of the minutes in front of it where the presentation was given in front of the board, and they passed that 5-0. So I do have the minutes where the golf course board agreed with that.
Well, they weren't gonna have to pay anything for it.
They would accept it.
Right. And I don't disagree, you can make that area look better. It is a very important corridor to the city. Thousands of parents come in to go to that school, go to that football field, go to that golf course. We have some pretty big tournaments, fundraising tournaments here in Cameron that raise a lot of money through that golf course. So it is, I completely agree, it is a high profile area of Cameron. So if you want to work on that corridor, yeah, that's one piece. But you would also want to get on, 5 blocks of Harris that is in pretty rough shape. Do you try to piggyback the whole, I realize it's different funds going different places, but if you wanna attack that corridor, do you try to do more of a multi-pronged approach, I guess I should say?
I don't have any problem trying to improve things as much as we can, because I think that's the key to marketing the community. This was chosen because it is such a high traffic area. We bring in so many other people from out of town, whether it's golf tournaments or school events or whatever. This is part of our image. This is what we are. So every time we upgrade that, then we differentiate ourselves from our competition, like City, Carney, whatever. It's a small thing. Yes, they didn't ask for it. This is about improving Cameron and our ability to market ourselves and our image. So, in a recent conversation with one of the top producing agents, he told me when somebody comes in from out of town, he takes a huge part of his time, not showing them houses, but showing them Cameron, trying to convince them to move here. I would agree with that. And 4.5 decades of marketing this community in different capacities as a real estate agent and in other ways, that is absolutely correct. And there's a lot of things that I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about insurance. That's why I have insurance agents. I do know about marketing this community. I've dealt with literally thousands of people when they are making the decision to actually spend their money. Do they come here? Do they not? Do they want to stay? Do they not? So I believe that image and special projects and all the things we're trying to do to bring value to this community in as many ways as possible, ultimately will elevate life in this community, bring more opportunity, and will improve the situation with our roads. That's one component. So, you clearly are opposed to this. You have some plans on how we're going to fix the road situation.
Put money in the item item?
Well, you were on the finance committee and you had the opportunity to put in 500,000 and you didn't because it's not there. It's the same reason we didn't put it in. Figure we saw was 130. So if the money's not there, then the money's not there. So what are we going to do about it? If there's no plan, then all we're doing is kicking the can down the road and leaving it for the next guy.
Well, I'm good for a plan, Denny. Good
Well,
plan.
You've seen a plan on what just a simple 10% increase in commerce can do for all these different funds. Parks, police, fire, the sewer, the stormwater, streets, general fund. All of those things benefit all of us. If we can simply increase our commerce 10% eventually, we all benefit.
Well,
That's way better than us paying for it. Let's get somebody else to pay.
Going down that corridor, what always grabs me in the last couple of years is the beautiful school buildings that are there. I always gravitate towards them and look at them. And I don't even look over to just these poles that have a rod in them. They look sturdy, they look fine, it looks neat. But I look at how the people of Cameron have invested in the learning of their children and the buildings that they've given them the assets. So I think that corridor is well maintained as far as looking at the schools and what Cameron does.
All right, well, I think everybody knows my opinion, so where do you want to go from here, manager? Do we want to go ahead and vote or what?
I would like to suggest that we talk to the board at the golf course. And I think maybe before we move ahead, that we should hold them to their end of the bargain.
Just get a commitment of something. I realize we don't.
I'm sorry, who hold who to their end of the bargain?
The golf course. I mean, if these are collaborative projects, then they need to be collaborative projects.
Okay, but there wasn't any part that the golf course had to do, they were just agreeing to accept it as a gift. The other party is not from the golf course, it's other parties in the city who are gonna raise this money.
He is a golfer. He's a golfer. And so he was simply going to scholarship. Some of the service clubs that use that for their, I'm not concerned about him raising the money. He'll talk, it's, number one, it's a small amount. I'm fine waiting if that's what everybody wants to do. But, the service clubs that use it for their fundraisers, some of the people out there, I think he's going to try and raise 3,000 if I understand correctly. So, or we can do it and say we'll approve it subject to him raising the 3,000. That's another way of approaching it.
So you do just approve 12?
Well, I think if we approved 15, we'd know we had enough if they can raise 3. And, or we can do it that way, either way, I don't care. I just think we need, that corridor has too many people passing through it. If we can get an upgrade, I'm all over it. So, I mean, I'm happy with either one. I don't know, do we want to approve it subject to 3,000 being raised from an outside source?
Amend the motion, how do we do that?
This, motion to amend is just a secondary motion that can go along with the initial motion, so it can be a motion to amend. Are you right, Michelle?
I am.
A motion to amend resolution 2021-12 to require certain individuals and entities to raise up to $3,000.
Or maybe at least up to means.
At least $3,000 prior to the city expending funds on the project.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, just to clarify then, what that means is that you're authorizing then the staff to go ahead and move forward with the expenditure of that money for this project, subject to getting the money from the donations without having to come back to you again.
So Patrick, I would change the resolution and add that as a section, and then have it signed?
What you can do is reflect on the minutes that the resolution was amended, and if we want to go ahead and read the title again, just at the end after fence, comma, as amended. So reread the title, and then right after fence, just add as amended.
Okay.
And then it'll reflect on the minutes that the resolution was amended.
Do they need to vote on it first?
They need to vote on the motion to amend, and they need to vote on the motion to finally pass. As amended.
If there's no further discussion on the amendment, we will go ahead and proceed to vote.
On the amendment.
On the amendment, if I understood the council correctly.
You
So
did.
what we're voting on is, we will authorize, is it 12 or 15,000? We will,
I thought it was 12.
okay, we'll authorize $12,000 in the event that some other entity can raise $3,000.
I would point out that the resolution itself does not contain a dollar figure. It says for an appropriate cost and time frame. So while it's budgeted at $15,000, the resolution itself does not have a dollar figure. So,
Is the amendment sufficient if you say
yes,
that
the
way?
amendment is more than sufficient to get us to where I believe the council is directed.
Okay. So just to repeat, to make sure we're on the same page, we're authorizing the expenditure of $12,000 for a fence out at the golf course if somebody raises another $3,000 to pick it up to 15. We're all understanding it the same way?
Well, that's not the motion that I wrote down. It was motion to amend the resolution to require certain entities or individuals to raise at least $3,000 prior to the city expending funds. There was no mention of a dollar.
And you'd have to put in the funds of $12,000.
Is that okay with you?
Sure. What happened was when we looked at the image improvements on that list, there were $30,000 on that list, and we looked out and saw what might we need then for the golf course fence, and we had a bid for $12,000, but we put in $15,000 to make sure we could cover for any raises in that since we got that bid last fall, and that's how we came up with $15,000. It's an approximation because we don't know until we get a bid in. We're not asking to approve a bid.
So I'm not sure how to incorporate the $12,000.
It is my belief that you don't need to incorporate the $12,000, because again, the initial resolution does not state a price. The budgeted amount that was approved in the base resolution that we've been working off of for all the community projects was $15,000. So if there's a change to that, we would change that resolution, not this one. This one does not have a price in it, it's just appropriate cost and time frame. So the motion as stated to amend is sufficient for now, and if there's any other changes to that base resolution, that would come back before council for an amendment to that $15,000 line that was put in there. Does everybody kind of track here? This resolution just says for an appropriate cost and time frame. We all understand that the appropriate cost is from the base resolution, but this resolution itself does not trigger or require $15,000 to be spent. So what we're saying in this amendment right here is that the city's funding for this project does not occur and is not triggered until outside individuals raise at least $3,000. Now, if that means that the city spends $12,000, that means the city spends $12,000. If it means the city spends $10,000, it means the city spends $10,000, and that change would be reflected on an amendment to the prior resolution, the base resolution for all these community projects that the city council approved.
I guess I'd just like to know how big a check you're gonna have to write before I say, let's do that.
Well, again, whenever you're budgeting, a budget is a budget isn't an expense, right? So we don't know how much we're gonna expend until the funds are raised, which they have to at least be $3,000 until bids are received. So right now, leaving it with that openness that this resolution provides means that the project could occur without a third or fourth time coming back. That's why I had the amendment the way I did.
Okay,
So where we at?
we're gonna vote on the amendment and then we'll vote on the motion. Okay, so all those in favor of passing the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
4 in favor, 1 opposed. Okay, now we'll go to passing the original motion.
And Shelley, read the resolution as amended after that.
So we will pass the resolution as it just was amended. All those in favor?
I'm gonna read it.
Oh, okay, thank you. We'll take that.
Just give me a second, I'll write that down.
Okay.
Resolution 2021-12, a resolution authorizing the expenditure of funds for a community project, Veterans Memorial Golf Course Fence, as amended.
All right, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
4 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries. Okay. Next item on the agenda, Resolution 2021-13.
Resolution 2021-13, a resolution authorizing the expenditure of funds for 3 collaborative Chamber of Commerce City of Cameron Initiative grant projects.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to pass Resolution 2021-13.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Honor. Resolution 2038 from last fall authorized the expenditure of matching funds out of the Community Projects Fund for Chamber Initiative grants and established that all such projects would be approved by the council. This resolution then moves forward 3 such grants, and those are $500 each from the city to be matched by the Chamber of Commerce. 1 is for LeBrant Jewelry, 2 is for the Aesthetic Beauty Skin Studio, and 3 is for Kemper Motors.
Okay. All right, are there questions or comments?
Are all of these chamber businesses?
I do not know the answer to that question, but we can ask that question here. Thank you.
I apologize, I didn't hear the question.
Are all of the three people that are getting grants chamber members?
Yes, they are.
Are you supposed to only give to chamber members?
That is part of the initiative, yes, requirements.
Are there other questions or comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed to vote. All those in favor of passing resolution 2021-13, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, 5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, public participation. If there's anybody wishing to address the council, please come to the podium, give your name and your address, and you'll be given 5 minutes to address the council.
I'm Gina Reed. I live at 324 East 5th Street. If anyone would like to drive past my house, that I have put a new foundation under, that I have painted, that I have put all new electrical and wiring in. However, I still have an ugly yard because I feel like the interior, say the infrastructure of my house has been more important. And so I was also born with the curse of being able to see both sides of an argument. I can see where people would want me to have a better looking exterior to my house. I can understand that. However, in my point of view, when I have an abandoned house to the north of me, an abandoned house to the east of me, 2 car replaces to the west of me, and an alley behind me, I feel like I've got the best looking place on the whole almost block. Oh, I do. But I'm still getting tickets from code enforcement for how it looks outside. And so, a point that I want to make right now is that yes, I know we need to make the city of Cameron look better. That is important because all of America is getting squeezed. We have less and less revenue. We just saw that in a very long set of financial statements. Everybody. In 1975, I was so proud of my mother because she made $5,000 a year as a teacher. Now, I think teachers make some of them in the 50,000. But some corporate people are getting more and more. The middle is being squeezed. We're kind of in the middle town. I'll get to the point here. I really will before my 5 minutes is up. Right. So we're being squeezed. We have to do the things to make the place look better. We do. But, on the other hand, when we have people that probably have enough money that they could reach $3,000 in an evening while they're playing cards, why are we giving them money? The irony of this fencing, and Dennis Clark, I appreciate everything you've done for me, because an offhand remark you made last year, I have not had to deal with code enforcement, because he did say, you know, if Gina Reed's getting a ticket, you know, why is she getting tickets when she has all this crap around her? And that's the truth. And so they have laid off, I feel like they laid off of me. And I'm sorry that people have taken that offhand remark and the fact that I'm several $100s richer this year because of not going and getting fines. You know, I'm glad. I appreciate that help. But I still believe, now because I'm still working on my house and I've got people coming to work on my yard this year. I finally got this other stuff done. I'm gonna work on my yard. 324 East 5th, please come and look. I don't know why we're taking public money to give to a fence. And the very most ironic thing about this is this happening this night is that there is a lady that's getting pulled into court in this next week or so because she has a combination wood and chain link fence, and that's not in the code. Okay, how can we justify finding her and taking that money and giving it to wealthy people in the golf course? I do not understand that. That is a problem I have. And so, even though it would be great to be known as one of the most beautiful towns around, with all the parks and trails and things, what would happen if we also became known as one of the most compassionate towns in towns around? And if people have a combination wooden and metal fence, that maybe we should see if we can just tolerate that for a while. I see no problem with a combination wooden metal fence unless there's something falling down about it. Why don't we help this lady get a better fence? Or why don't we just decide that everybody's okay with what they got? You know, a more compassionate town, frankly, I think would be a better draw than all the beauty that there is to be artificially made. And that's all I have to say.
That was really good, that right at 5 minutes.
Manager.
Practice makes perfect.
In the coming week and evaluate the situation, please.
I certainly will, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Don't worry, Danny, I'm not coming after you tonight. Congratulations.
Thanks.
And congratulations. Actually, I'm here tonight because I have talked to the park board, well, to the president, and I'll be going to the park board. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but they sold, you're aware. They've sold the ball fields to the school. Last year, I believe it was, maybe even 18 months ago. With that, the school has decided to padlock the doors to number 1 and 2 field. So there are no fields for our 14-year-olds or older to be able to practice on at this point in time. Now, I know that the original agreement, I believe, Drew, and tell me if I'm wrong, was to work through with the Y for 3 years, they'd have access. We're not with the Y, and I don't know how many teams total that there are in this Little League group that we're in, but I know there's 3 teams at 14U. And I know that the Elks Lodge is getting hammered with requests. I had Mr. Erickson, I talked to him. He went out and tried to get us some practice time, and there were 12 other teams trying to practice out there. So my request to the city is maybe working with the park board. I will go to the park board meeting. Is that Thursday?
It is.
Okay. I'll also go to the park board, but I'm just asking for a little help. Maybe talking to some folks with the school. The last I heard was they would allow us to rent on Sundays only at this point, the ball fields for the day. So I look at this and I think back of all the years of paying the taxes and everything else from the park board, from the sales tax, whatever, to be able to utilize those ball fields and to go out there and see padlocks on those doors. It was, I was pretty upset, to be honest with you. Thought about going home and getting my snips. I didn't, but it was close. So I was frustrated, and I admit it. But it's, you know, Denny, you've talked about this for years, and I agree. We've got to do things to bring in people, to bring in money. The ball fields is one of those things that it brings in a ton of people from a lot of different areas. This year, just with the 14U, I'm sorry, I don't know all the younger, the girls, I don't know any of those members from that league over there that are gonna have Cameron teams. But from our 3, we have 12 games each. 6 would be home games. So that's 18 games that we will more than likely not be able to have here. That's 18 times people are traveling here and spending money here. So if there is a way that you guys can work with the park board can work with the school, just see if there's something we can do. We could even have it, maybe all our home games end up being on Sundays in an afternoon or something. I don't know. I'll let you guys figure that out if you guys can work with them on it. But I just wanted to make folks aware, because I don't think a lot of people knew. I didn't know that they were going to be padlocked. And so I can't even take my son out there on field 2 if I just want to throw it to him like I used to. There's no games, there's no other practices going on. I just want to take him out, throw the ball. Can't do it. It's locked. So anyway, that's it. I didn't want to get into anything else too big, but anyway, if we could maybe look at that. I know you've got special interests, so anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
I want to talk to you about the Community Projects Fund because I have talked to Steve months back about including Safe Haven's Trap and Neuter Spay Release Program. And we discussed that, and he indicated that there'd already been money approved, but that we would get on the second. I think it's a win-win, because if it's a 50-50, then we would have to do that many. It has to be done as we go along, so when we reach our threshold, then after that, the city would pitch in. This is a program that we've talked about for years, and when I say years, I've been doing Safe Haven 20-some-odd years, and this was one of the projects that we just keep plugging along trying to get. The city has talked about doing that. I really think that Safe Haven and Gigi's Prison Paws can do this because we have the time. The city does not have the time and I'm not being critical. This is labor intensive. It has to be done a certain way, at a certain time. We just can't go run out and get a bunch of cats. There's an issue that we have, a ordinance that says cats can't run at large. So in fact, we would be breaking an ordinance by picking these cats up, because the idea is you spay them, neuter them, get them their shots, put them back out to the community who's taking care of them. That's an issue, because we can't do that, because there is an ordinance that was enacted 2 years ago, something like that, that says cats can't run at large. And that's kind of like who can enforce that, because that's not my cat. So in order for us to do this, and we will do it, but I would like to take advantage of some of this Community Projects Fund if we need it. I'm not saying we will need it, because again, it's not something we're going to purchase all at once. We're going to do our part, and when we reach our goal, because I've already kind of targeted some people. Kathy and I had already talked about this months ago, but I think it's something that Cameron really needs to do, because we have a terrible, terrible cat problem. And it isn't getting any better, and people don't like to talk about it, but they do talk about it. And when they do talk about it, it's a big deal. And so I just would like for you guys to consider us, to put us on, I'm not asking for a lot, I don't even start out at 2,500, and we'll see how it works. I've talked to both vets in town. I'm not driving cats all over the country, not gonna do it. We do a few here. We're not gonna overrun anybody with animals or cats, because this is a volunteer thing. This is not our livelihood, so we're just doing this out of the kindness of our heart, and it's for all of us. I mean, nobody wants to see that hungry cat, sick cat, run over cat, and it's time consuming. I will tell you that Safe Haven has been helping the city with cats. I have spayed Safe Haven has stayed 6 in the last 6 months, found them homes, and that's in addition to what the city's done. So there's no criticism here at all. I just say, as we're talking about what makes this community great, what makes this community, people want to live here, and it is compassion, Gina. It's a lot of compassion, and that's what we've shown that we've had for a lot of years. It didn't used to be like that. But Cameron's really come together, and there's just one thing we need to do, and that's take care of these cats. So if you would consider that, I'd appreciate it. And we'll just go ahead and do what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to address the council on public participation? Okay, seeing none, that will conclude our second one. Miscellaneous comments from staff.
Yes, given the hour, the staff has asked me to communicate to you that none of them had anything
I'm assuming you're serious on that, so we'll go ahead and go to, we'll go to comments from the council.
Okay, well, first of all, I would like to welcome John Ingram to the council and welcome Becky back to the council. We're still on the council. Congratulations on your win. Mr. Feiger, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention because whether those kids are in with the YMCA program or not, they are Cameron's kids. That's all I have.
Councilwoman.
Oh, thank you for putting all of us on the finance committee. That was so nice, thank you, Dave. And also the wrestlers of last weekend, I'm gonna congratulate them from our young wrestlers in camp. And that's pretty much it.
Excellent. I will come at John's. We have been ball field deficient for years, and this only all magnified all at one time. So hopefully we can get the other 3 open as quickly as possible. So, you used to have 4, you have more kids, now you have 1 that we can go practice at. And I coached travel ball for a lot of years, and I was gonna be bringing in people from all over Northwest Missouri to come down here and practice, eat, pay gas, hang out, because that's what I did whenever I went to other towns. Because I didn't have anywhere to bring them, I couldn't get a field, couldn't even get an area. So there's other bigger picture things that, as a city, that we can do better. So that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Manning, it's probably been, like 2 or 3 years ago, I actually suggested a program where we would help fund spaying cats, because as I understand it, once you spay a feral cat, they become territorial and they run the other cats off, and they actually end up improving the situation. And so it may be something that almost would be revenue neutral by the time you save time. I don't know why we weren't able to clear that hurdle, but maybe we would come up with a specific proposal and then approach the manager and code enforcement and see if we can come up with something that's a workable program for everybody. Okay. So that concludes all the remarks from the council, and the next item on the agenda is executive session for attorney-client communication, real estate, negotiated contracts, and operational guidelines. We'll be for a while. The chair would entertain a motion that we go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Roy Estes.
Yes.
John Ingram.
Yeah.
Dennis M. Clark.
Yes.
Becky Curtis.
Yes.
Julie Osborne.
Yes.
Motion carries 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.